Hello everyone, it's Marie and welcome to another video. So today I'm going to be talking all about the living cost here in New Zealand and just how I'm finding it, whether I'm finding it quite expensive to live here or areas that I'm finding it to be very cheap, and just what my thoughts were on it before I got here, like what I was told by other people and what I'm actually finding. So yeah, I'm just going to get into it. So before I came to New Zealand, when I told everyone I was coming here, I was told that it would be really expensive. I was warned that I should pack tons of stuff, like all the winter clothes I need, all the summer clothes I need, everything I could possibly need. I was told that clothes, shoes, camping equipment, food, everything is really expensive. That's what I was told. And so I, packed more than I normally would have, and I kind of worried thinking it would be really expensive. And then I got here and I'm going to be honest, I'm not really finding it that expensive. I'm finding it really no different to the UK or any other parts of Europe that I've been to. Obviously, there are some parts of Europe, especially when I was in like Hungary and Slovakia, where I found it super cheap. But as a whole, I'm really not finding it that expensive here. So I think one reason why I'm not finding it so expensive is because I'm really good at being frugal, I'm really good at being cheap, and I'm really good at finding bargains. And I'm really good at saving money. So I think that's one reason why I'm finding it pretty cheap here. But another reason is just, I think it just depends on your travel style as well. I think a lot of people that told me it was expensive here, maybe they travel to a more expensive standard. When I travel, I don't do any major tourist attractions. I don't tend to do all the expensive stuff. I don't stay in hostels or hotels or even Airbnbs. While I'm here in New Zealand, I'm actually renting a room in an apartment and I'm paying the same price a local would pay. So personally, I'm not finding it that expensive. So I'm just going to break things down and just give you a rough idea of the costs of certain things and what has surprised me by being super cheap and what actually is pretty expensive in my opinion. And remember, this is just my opinion, and all I've experienced so far is Auckland and Tauranga and Rotorua and just other areas around the Bay of Plenty. So all I've really experienced is the North Island, so I'm not sure how expensive the South Island would be, but this is just my experience so far of New Zealand and what I've personally found. Anyway, I'm just going to get into it and break down some things. First of all, when it comes to clothes, personally, I think that there definitely are more cheaper fast fashion shops in Europe and in the UK, like Primark and H&M. You can obviously buy super cheap fast fashion and you can get it for really low prices in Europe, which you I haven't seen any of those kind of shops here in New Zealand, but however, I'm not really a fast fashion high street clothes buyer anyway. I don't remember the last time I shopped in H&M. Actually, this is from H&M, but regardless, I don't remember the last time I really shopped in H&M or Primark because I don't tend to buy fast fashion anymore, since I went more minimal and became more conscious of things I buy. I tend to buy from charity shops and second hand, even back in the UK and in Europe. So here in New Zealand, I've been doing the same. I actually picked up some clothes here in New Zealand from charity shops. I bought this blue top. I bought this blue top for like $2, which is like £1, in a charity shop here in New Zealand. And I bought these trousers for about $10, which is about £5 in a charity shop, and these are a really good brand. And the top, I don't know if you can see, but I'm currently wearing a top as well that I got from a charity shop, which cost me about $3. And I got a pair of swim shorts as well for about $4 from a charity shop here. So as you can tell, here in New Zealand there are tons of charity shops, especially where I'm living. I'm living in the Greyton area of Tauranga. There's tons of charity shops here, but also near the Mount there's tons of charity shops. In fact, there's just tons of charity shops in general around New Zealand, so just have a look. If you want to buy any clothes, charity shops are an option here. You can buy anything from them, from furniture to clothes to cutlery, pots, pans. I'm sure you can buy pretty much anything from a charity shop here, books, whatever. So yeah, I guess the difference between living here and being a backpacker is quite different because, I don't really think I'm a backpacker. I'm definitely kind of travelling around while I'm here, but I'm also basing a bit more, and I would consider myself living in New Zealand, so I am okay to like buy things from charity shops. I have the time. I guess if you're just like travelling around and you're a backpacker and you're wanting to buy like souvenirs and go to gift shops, it would probably be quite expensive, to buy like a hoodie saying New Zealand on it from a gift shop. That's not the kind of thing I would buy. I travelled Europe for a year and I never bought any souvenirs apart from like maybe one or two things, like a bag or something. It's not like me to buy souvenirs, so I guess maybe compared to other countries it's expensive to buy touristy souvenirs here, but that's not the kind of thing I buy anyway. Also, there's the Facebook marketplace here. Phones, furniture, cars. You can buy tons of used stuff on the Facebook marketplace here like you can anywhere in the world. Once again, you can buy it super cheap. Obviously, if you wanted to buy everything brand new and you wanted to buy expensive souvenirs and stuff, it's going to be expensive. But if you are traveling here long term and you're living here or whatever, you can buy things secondhand like anywhere in the world, and it doesn't end up being that expensive. It ends up being pretty cheap. So one thing that I found is super cheap here compared to the UK and Europe in general is fast food. So you can go to Domino's or Pizza Hut here and you can buy pizza for like $5, which is like £3, and you could never do that in the UK. In the UK, if you go to Pizza Hut or Domino's, you're looking at £15 minimum. That's like $25, $30 in New Zealand for a pizza. I mean, for me, I buy gluten-free pizza and I usually get it without cheese or with vegan cheese, and it would cost me like £15 in the UK. Here, it's like $10, which is like £5 or £6. So fast food here is pretty cheap, definitely cheaper than the UK. But then again, if you want to buy a bag of chips from here, you're looking at like $3.50, $4, which is like a couple of pounds, which is what you pay in the UK for chips. So it depends where you go, but it's pretty much the same, if not, as you can tell with pizza, a lot cheaper than the UK. I've not had a sit-down meal out in a restaurant here yet, because it's not what I do. I travelled Europe for a year and I only had a sit-down meal maybe 3 or 4 times in the whole year I was there. Once again, not something I do. I'm a very frugal, very cheap person, so going out to eat isn't something I do. So I couldn't tell you how much that costs here. I'm assuming maybe it's more than the UK, but that's not something I have experience with. Now, in terms of rent and living, once again, I haven't personally found it to be any more than the UK or Europe. Depends where you go, but as a whole I've found living in New Zealand isn't that expensive. I'm personally paying $150 a week, which is New Zealand dollars a week, for my room, which is a private room in an apartment with other travellers and other people. So I'm paying about, what is $150? Like £90, 90 Great British pounds a week for a private room. And I know people staying in hostels that are paying like $30 a night for a shared room with like 10 other people. So just be cautious of where you stay. Like if you're fast travelling and you're only in a certain place for 3 or 4 days at a time, you're obviously going to have to stay in a hostel, but it's going to cost you more. But if you are staying somewhere like me for like 3 to 4 months and you're living here and working here, you can just rent a room and pay the same price the locals pay, and it ends up being much, much, much cheaper. So personally, I'm not finding rent to be expensive here, and I found in Auckland it wasn't actually much more than it is here in Tauranga, and I know people living in Queenstown and living in Oamaru on the South Island, and they are paying about the same as what I'm paying here. So I think that as a whole, it's how you find your places. I mean, if you stay in expensive hotels and expensive hostels, I'm sure that they're going to be targeted at tourists and they're going to be expensive, but if you think like a local and live like a local, you actually end up paying a pretty cheap, decent price. So yeah, that's just my experience with rent. If you can, always go to the Facebook pages or Roomster. Look online to find your apartment and try and find long term if you are staying here long term, because it ends up being so much cheaper than staying in a hotel or a hostel. So another thing that I found is really cheap is driving in general. You know, I'm going out to view and buy a new car today, and I'm going to be paying about £750, £800 for a pretty good car, and I'm pretty sure I would pay double that in the UK for a used car. But once again, it depends. I mean, you can get cheap cars in the UK, but yeah, I'm getting a pretty nice car. Fingers crossed I actually get it today, and it's not expensive at all to buy a used car here. And in terms of insurance, it is so cheap here for car insurance compared to the UK. So let me just give you an idea. Back in the UK, me and Andy, for our car, we were paying £450 a year for our car insurance, and we had 8 years no claims on our car insurance because we'd never claimed ever. I was over 25 and now Andy's over 25. So at the time we were, you know, not new drivers, not young drivers, you know, we'd had a lot of years behind us, and our car insurance was still £450 for the year for a 1.4 litre engine car. Whereas for the minivan we've got now in New Zealand, it cost me not even £75 for the year, and that's a 2.4 litre engine car. So it's so cheap here for car insurance. In fact, I think it's not even $20 a month for the car insurance, which is just mind-blowing. I mean, I was paying like £50 a month for my car insurance back in the UK, and here you can pay like £10 a month for a car insurance for a big vehicle, so I couldn't imagine what it would be for a small vehicle. So I mean, bear in mind I am over 25 now and I don't have any claims and I've got a good license, but still. In the UK, in Andy's first year of driving, it cost him like £3,000 for his car insurance because he was only 17 and, you know, it was his first year of driving, but here you would never pay that much money for your first year of driving. So yeah, in my opinion, in my experience, it's so much cheaper to drive here. But that also might contribute to the fact that there's not much public transport here compared to Europe and the UK. So one thing I do find is a little more pricey here is transport. So, you know, obviously in Europe you've got super cheap travel. You can fly to and from London to Berlin for like £20 return, whereas here you want a flight from maybe Auckland to Wellington or whatever, maybe you're paying like £80 for a flight. So flights are a bit more pricey, but once again I think it depends on when you would book it. You could, you know, it could even be as expensive as £150, £200 for a flight across New Zealand, whereas you can obviously fly anywhere in Europe for very cheap on like Ryanair and EasyJet and stuff. So I think flying is definitely cheaper in Europe compared to here, and obviously in Europe you can get to lots of different places very quickly and very easily, whereas here you're kind of stuck in New Zealand and it's going to be expensive to leave. So obviously that is one downside to being in New Zealand. It's definitely more expensive to go on holiday to leave the country, but once again I think that I could probably find a pretty good deal because I am good at finding cheap deals. And also in terms of public transport, I mean, once again I don't really think trains are a big thing here, but in the UK it's expensive to have a train. I mean, I tried to get the train from London to Manchester to see my friend before I came to New Zealand, and it would have cost me like £80, whereas it cost me £20 to go to Berlin to see my friend Mackenzie. So, I mean, in the UK it's quite expensive for public transport too, but I do find as a whole, you know, it is a little more expensive for public transport here, but at the same time, I mean, you can get a bus from Tauranga to Wellington for like £20, and if you book in advance you can get it for like $1, so I don't think it's that expensive for public transport here either. When I was in Auckland I have one of those, I don't know if I've got it with me, I've got like a hop card, or I think it's got a hop card. It's a card to let you on the public transport, and once again I found I could go to and from the city from West Auckland where I was staying for like not even $2 or $3, which is, you know, what you'd probably pay in the UK on the London Underground. So yeah, I'm not finding that too bad either. So some things that I am finding expensive here are things like tourist attractions. I was with a friend and we went to Rotorua and we wanted to go to Hell's Gate, and for that you're looking at like $100 and something to get in Hell's Gate and to do the mud bath and stuff, which is like £60 or something, or maybe more. So that definitely is a lot of money, and you know, I don't think I have to tell you we didn't go to Hell's Gate because it was just too expensive. I'm not willing to pay that much money on a tourist attraction. And also, you know, to go to Hobbiton you're looking at like quite a lot of money. It'll cost you $100 or $150, maybe £200, I don't know, but it costs you quite a lot of money to go to places like Hobbiton, especially if you want the whole tour. But yeah, some of the tourist attractions aimed at tourists are definitely quite expensive, and they're those once in a lifetime things which I would probably pay for once in a lifetime. But so things like that can be pretty expensive. But at the same time, you just have to know how to live like a local and find the local gems. Like, I'll link the vlog up here, but I went to Rotorua and we went to a natural thermal spring. It was a lake that was heated, it's called Hot and Cold, and it was just amazing, and it was totally free because it doesn't cost anything to go there. You can go there for free, you can swim in a thermal lake, and it's free and it's natural and it's awesome. So you can find things like that. You know, I've been walking up the mounts, hiking up Papamoa Hills. You know, there's so many natural beauties and wonders here in New Zealand. You can just go to the beaches, you can do surfing, there's so much you can do for a very reasonable price, if not for free. So chat to the locals, make local friends. Last week we went to another natural spring, which was a cold spring, and it was like a really nice medicinal spring, and it was totally free, and no one knew about it, so we had it totally to ourselves. Once again, I knew about this place because my local friend told me about it. So chat to the locals and find the places that are free and are just as good. We're actually going to a spring today and we're paying about $14 for it, which is like £8 or something, which once again I don't think is too expensive. When I was in Budapest I think I must have paid about €14 for the thermal baths in Budapest. So actually it's cheaper here to go in the thermal spring than it was in Budapest, and Budapest is Eastern Europe and it's supposed to be super cheap there. Whereas here I'm paying like half the price of Budapest to go in a thermal spring. So once again, it just depends which ones you go to. I'm sure there are some super expensive thermal springs here. Like I said, Hell's Gate super expensive, and there's some in Rotorua that are aimed at tourists that are super expensive. So I would just not go to them. I'd go to the cheap ones or the free ones that you know, it doesn't take long to Google search. I mean, I've got a website. I'm going to try and use my website to showcase all the more free things that you can do in New Zealand that you don't have to pay for, the things that I've learned from the locals. So definitely look at my website if you're going to New Zealand and you want to find free things to do. You don't have to have a local friend. You can Google search it. There are blogs out there that tell you about unknown hidden gems that are free in certain countries that you don't have to pay for. So that's just my advice. Find the cheap things. I barely spend a penny while I'm here on anything I do. I'm so happy just to go to the beach and swim, hike a mountain, hike the hills, swim in the free rivers that are available here and have a great time doing all that. I don't care about eating out every night in an expensive restaurant or, you know, going to all the expensive tourist attractions. So another thing that I'm finding is expensive is alcohol. So if you want to go out to a pub or like a bar or something and drink lots of alcohol, a night out's going to cost you quite a lot of money. Thankfully, I'm not really a big heavy drinker and I don't tend to go out clubbing or partying. I mean, if you compare it to Budapest where you could get shots for like €1 and beers for like €1, it's very expensive here for alcohol. But once again, do what I do. I go to the local supermarket and I'll grab myself a few bottles of cider. And they have some pretty good cider here in New Zealand. I highly recommend it. But yeah, go to the supermarket, grab yourself some bottles of cider or some beers and you can drink at home with your friends. Some restaurants here have a bring your own policy where you can just bring your own alcohol and then you buy food there. And there's a really cool fish and chip shop here which is super cheap. It's called Bobby's and it's awesome, and you can bring your own alcohol and buy some fish and chips there and you can have a nice time drinking alcohol with your own alcohol which you bought from a shop which is cheaper, and then you can just buy some fish and chips there which is super cheap. But yeah, so that's an option. I haven't personally tried to buy any shoes here yet or any trainers or anything brand new or boots, but I mean, from my experience of looking in shops and briefly browsing, I'd say they definitely aren't any more than other places. Once again, it's definitely a little expensive to buy the branded stuff, but I mean, I think that's the same as what you'd pay for in the UK anyway. You know, I was told by one of my local friends that you can go to somewhere like Warehouse and you can buy cheap trainers and clothes and things. So I guess there's cheap versions of things here too, or you can buy the named brand that's going to cost you a bit more expensive. I mean, maybe it's a little more, but I don't find it much more. I found just when you're over here, don't try and buy exactly what you buy back home. Just buy the things that the locals buy. Buy the Australian brands, buy the New Zealand brands, buy the Asian brands. So obviously there's lots of electronic shops and stuff here. If you want to buy a phone, buy one of the phone brands that are more popular here. I've found there's a lot more Asian and Japanese, Chinese phones here than there is over in Europe. So if I actually need to buy a new phone soon. I'll probably end up buying one of those phones because they're more local to the country, the import costs are cheaper and they're more common over here, so I'd probably just buy one of those. I wouldn't try and buy myself the same phone I'd buy back in the UK because it might be more expensive, so I'd just buy something that the locals would buy and then it ends up being just as cheap. A really good example is with food. I was in a supermarket a few weeks ago and I saw some Yorkshire tea on the shelf, and it was in like the foreign food aisle, which was the UK food aisle, and it ended up, I mean, the cost was like $35 for a box of Yorkshire tea. So I didn't buy it because obviously in the UK you can buy Yorkshire tea for a couple of quid, but here you can't because it's not from here, it's from Yorkshire in the UK, so you're going to pay a lot of money for it to get here. So I just wouldn't buy it. I ended up going to the tea section here in the local shop and I found a box of tea for like $4, which was like tea that was made in New Zealand, and it's like, I'll just buy that one. I'm not just going to buy the one from the UK because it's what I'm used to. I'm going to buy the New Zealand one, you know. I go to Pack and Save a lot and Countdown, and if I wanted to buy some beans, I would buy the beans that are produced here in New Zealand, or the own brand beans, like the own brand for that shop, and they end up being like 87 cents, like cents or something. Either way, they end up being super cheap, like less than $1 for a can of beans and less than $1 for, you know, a can of sweet corn and that kind of stuff. So just buy the own brand stuff, buy the local brands, buy the cheaper stuff. Don't try and buy what you're used to from your own country because it's going to cost you more. So just buy the stuff that's local to here. I mean, I buy myself packs of frozen veg and packs of frozen fruit, and I end up buying just the cheap own brand bags. I don't end up buying the stuff that comes from, I don't know, somewhere else. I don't end up spending money on the expensive brands. I guess if there's anything you could take from this video, it's just learn to eat, sleep, live like a local when you're travelling to that country. Obviously it's easy for me being here long term, so if you're here on a working holiday, just try and develop these habits. But if you're not, even if you're just passing through, you can apply it. I mean, when I travelled through Europe, some places I was only in for a week. to 2 weeks at a time, some for just a few days, and I still applied a lot of these habits myself, even when I was just passing through, you know. I still tried to eat with and like the locals, and I didn't spend all the money on the expensive tourist attractions, and you know, I always find a way to be frugal and I always find a way to keep the cost down. And also it's good to just justify. So like, sometimes you can splurge a bit of money, sometimes you can be really cheap, but just know if you think it's worth it or not. But as a whole, I mean, before I came here, I was told by a lot of people that New Zealand and Australia are super expensive, and I can't speak for Australia because I haven't really spent much time there, but for New Zealand I can tell you that I'm really not finding it as shocking as I was told. I'm really finding it about the same as the UK. I mean, in terms of petrol, I mean, I fill up my car with petrol all the time. I had a pretty big car, it's quite hungry on petrol, and I'm not finding it really to be any more expensive than the UK would cost me for that kind of car. And I think it helps that I've come from travelling around Europe, which isn't a super cheap place. I think a lot of people, they come from maybe developing countries, or they'll come from like countries that are a lot cheaper to live at. A lot of digital nomads, you know, they'll live in a really cheap location where it's dirt cheap and it costs barely anything to live there, and then they come over here and maybe it's a shock to their system. But for me personally, coming from the UK and a lot of Europe, which is really not much different to here, I'm not finding it that different or shocking or expensive. So hoping that this video was helpful, and I'm hoping I was in focus for a lot of it, because I've really been struggling to focus my camera recently. The autofocus is broken and it's not easy to focus it manually when you can't see yourself. So yeah, I'm just going to end this video here. Leave a comment below and tell me, do you find New Zealand expensive? Like, what is your personal opinion? Like, can you agree with what I've said, or do you like totally disagree? Because I have a feeling I'm going to get tons of people commenting saying that they totally disagree with me and they found it super expensive, but I'm just giving my opinion. And I truly appreciated all the advice I was given before I came here by people telling me it was expensive, but all I'm giving is my personal opinion and my personal findings. And like I said, I think it's just because I'm a very frugal person, and no matter where I am in the world, I will always find a way to be cheap and save money. So maybe it helps that I've got that mindset and that I don't, you know, live like a tourist, I just live like a local. Maybe that's what helps me keep the cost down. But leave a comment. Did this video help you at all? Do you agree with it, or do you totally disagree? And what was the biggest thing that you found expensive or super cheap in New Zealand if you've been here? So yeah, I'm just going to end it here. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.